Awesome. So yeah, recap on tiny little bit. We know there's some challenges around GDK. We know it could be a little bit flaky. We know it can be a little bit slow, but no tangible data or numbers to be able to start improving it, and prove that we have actually improved it. So I embarked on a piece of work quite some time ago to look at how we could start tracking that and getting some data. It was quite challenging. There doesn't seem to be one single tool or platform to do that. I looked at things like Sentry. All of a sudden, my mind's gone blank. But I'm thinking like Google Analytics, Sentry. There were a lot of options, a lot of things that I looked at. But ultimately, the end result was we probably wanted two tools, or decided to go down the route of two tools, that there's slightly different problem space or solution required for the performance side of things to the error tracking side of things. But both of them we went with, I don't know if experimental was exactly the right term, but from talking to everyone at the GitLab team, we went with product analytics. So again, dog fooding using our own sort of solution, bit that is built on 17 other third-party solutions, but ultimately there's a GitLab front end for it. So product analytics for the sort of, I'm going to call it kind of performance and call it like analytical side of things. And then we went with what I believe we're just calling error tracking, for the error tracking side of things, again, within GitLab, so we can view that information. And I'll quickly bring up dashboards actually. So GitLab development. So we've got analytics dashboard. I can't remember if we're doing the error tracking in here yet or not. No, we're not. So the error tracking is still in a test project at the moment. So I kind of did the initial implementation of kind of handed it over to engineering productivity now to sort of take it further. And Oksana on my team is also doing a little bit of work with it. But yeah, so we essentially ended up landing on these two tools. I'll mention one more thing, and then you're going to tell us a little bit about.
Could you show me the other one, like the other one besides error tracking? I missed that one.
Into this one, yeah, absolutely. So the metrics, or product analytics is the correct term for it. So we've got a dashboard that kind of shows in the last 7 days how many times these things have occurred. Obviously on people that have got it enabled. We've got a more of a detailed breakdown, which actually tells us durations for each of the events, and the platform between remote development, Gitpod, native, and I'd hope to see GDK in a box in there somewhere. I can't immediately see it. But yeah, Oksana on my team is actually looking at this because we think that a lot of events are getting lost and that they're not actually making it to the data collection sort of platform. So there's a bit of work going on to look at that. You're probably really interested in this if you haven't seen it. And again, I think this is what Now's been looking at to sort of understand if we've made improvements around the sort of setup time for remote development.
So have we tracked what these were? Is there a way to see the historical values for this over time?
So that's partly what I think today's call is about, really looking at the raw data or querying it in ClickHouse, because at the moment the product analytics tool set, if that's the maturity of that feature isn't sufficient to be able to extract data from this kind of, let's say, JSON, like custom event props, we call them. So if we were, we could do metrics by user, we could do metrics by event name, we could do metrics by date, those kind of things, but we can't look at like this, extract this duration and do graphs, etc. from that at the moment. So it's coming, and I hope it will be like maybe in the sort of next quarter or so. but it's not quite there yet. So yeah, today we're going to drill down, have a little bit of a look in the sort of data source itself, where we can test your SQL skills and see if we can get something a bit more sort of meaningful. Similarly with error tracking, I think it's coming along. When I first implemented it, for example, this was always one, which was really unhelpful. So if one error was impacting one person, but was in sort of like a spiral, a loop, and was sending hundreds or thousands of events, I couldn't really differentiate that from something that's genuinely impacting lots of different users. Whereas now, at least we've got that. I want really to be able to drill down even further and actually see those users if they've opted in, if they've not gone for anonymous, if they've actually opted in to send their GitLab username. So I'd love to be able to kind of reach out, contact them, etc. But yeah, this is an interesting one. But my understanding is nobody's really looking at this data at the moment. So it's great that it's being captured and hopefully it will help us going forwards. But at some point, somebody probably really needs to own it and say, right, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to do? Do you want to just talk very briefly? You said about open telemetry that you've either recently implemented it or trying to implement it, or and why maybe as well you made that decision as opposed to no, actually, I've got to say one more thing. So at Summit, I found out a bit more about something else. There's a third GitLab owned product, and I can't remember. I think it might just be called Metrics. But as well as error tracking and product analytics, we've got a third thing. It might be Metrics or it might be Traces or something like that. And partly,
Yeah, I think that's what I'm about to tell you about.
Awesome. So yeah, part of me now, I know a little bit about that, wonders if, I'm not sure which one of these, but one of these would have been better, or both of them with that. So let's hand over and you can talk about what you've been doing.
Yeah, I can actually, I'm going to send you a link on Slack that you can open. You can just go ahead and keep doing the sharing. But yeah. Like while I talk about it.
Awesome.
There you go.
I mean, if you want me to stop so you can share.
No, it's okay. Like I don't have anything more than just hit refresh on here. Oh, you're not perhaps it's because you're not a maintainer.
Yeah, possibly. Let me stop and you share. Is that all
right? Yeah, it's not that interesting.
I'm sure it is.
I'll share really quick, and then I'm going to stop sharing and we'll do it again. Where are we here? So Open Telemetry is a standard that's been emerging over the past few years, but it's basically becoming the de facto standard for observability. And OpsTrace, which we acquired, a couple of years ago, this is based on the integration of OpsTrace into our product. And you can see here it's under the monitor, the same menu as the error tracking that you were just looking at. But there's different types of open telemetry, tracing and metrics, and there's like a lot of standard libraries for it that you just get stuff out of the box. I didn't even know we were going to be talking about this on this call, or I'd have a better
no, that's great. And
but you know how a trace works, like there's different spans and it shows
a waterfall style.
Yeah, waterfall. There's that, and then there's other ways you can slice it. Honeycomb is like sort of the gold standard of observability tools that if you look at it, it can show you everything that's possible, how fast the search is, like their SLA or SLO for searches is like everything returns in a second. Like compare that to Kibana. They have a really nice UI. It makes it really easy to drill down and find all the information you want. So, this is a new product, and it's obviously not up to that speed. But what I did over the past quarter, I just went ahead, and this is after talking to the folks in Honeycomb. I have some contacts with them.
Cool.
From the CEO on down, there's some nice coworkers there, and they're really supportive of our efforts and wanting to work with us. So I went ahead, took the open source open telemetry tools, they have all this instrumentation out of the box for Ruby, put it in the main GitLab product, and got that merged and just said, let's try to turn this on staging, which we did as of yesterday. But the data has already rolled off. Like we had to stop it. It was really just a trial to see what would blow up, and like a few things did. But
Yeah.
yesterday, this had like much more interesting data in it. When we had a
Okay.
1 hour span, it was like showing all of the metrics, and there were like some of these spans with multiple things in them. Like here, you can see there's only one span, but what you could imagine, like when I tried this in development, which you can do now. It's in the product, as long as you just point it to the tracing endpoint, and that's in the docs. You go to the docs for tracing. It'll tell you how to set up your token and all of this. And I actually
It
has some
has
docs
actually
about
loaded. This page is loaded for me now, weirdly. So
the mm, it might be in one of these. I actually added some docs as part of adding it. Again, woefully unprepared.
no.
I'm just gonna do it. Oh, look.
I
Actually,
pulled
when
you
I
at the
did a
last
time range
minute.
of 24 hours, you can see that it gave more interesting data than a 7-day one.
Nice.
Like we're trying to dog for this feature, but on the spans, you can see if this were, for example, a Rails request, and like when I tried it on development, it gives you a wealth of data. It like drills down to the controller level. It gives you the GraphQL. It gives you the individual GraphQL query, and then the individual database calls that are being made by that GraphQL query, and gives you the ease to drill down. But the cool thing about OpenTelemetry is like it's open standard API, and you can instrument whatever you want. So like you can throw, say, okay, here's a span ID at the beginning of my GDK operation, my GDK update or GDK. I'm going to just go and stop sharing because I'm not doing anything interesting. GDK update or GDK reconfigure, and then instrument it like, okay, all of the steps of that are the different steps in the span, and have the visualization of how long each of those steps took and be able to drill down. And I'm not sure about the historical information, like the same question I asked, but you can always compare that, or export the data, or take a screenshot or track it over time.
Yeah,
So
it's
it's a different approach, and maybe a more flexible approach, and a more standardized approach, and sort of the future is OpenTelemetry.
It's interesting because in a way, at least all of them they're following the same pattern. So the product analytics is using Snowplow, I think is the right I'm sure that's the right term. So again, that seems to be like a standard, an API, a well-defined protocol. The error tracking is using Sentry. So again, it's a well-defined.
Yeah, I still think Sentry is the standard de facto for error tracking. It's good.
But you don't get so I'll share mine again actually just for a second. The thing that's
and the interesting thing about OpenTelemetry is like even if we instrument that, like even if we, or maybe an on-premise customer or anybody else who was hacking on this, wanted to do it, they could just point it straight to a Honeycomb account, their own free Honeycomb account, and gather all the data they wanted. Honeycomb gives you a nice free tier, and it's all OpenTelemetry, a standard API. And I've done this, like the data will show up in both places.
Do you think that the traces could be appropriate for both like error tracking and for analytics, or do you think it's particularly useful?
I mean, error tracking is like what you have is probably pretty good. Tracking errors is a different goal than
it's very similar, right? With this kind of this is a bit like your kind of your trace, essentially, right? Oh, you're still muted at the moment, Chad.
Sorry, I muted myself. Like the stack trace is like where you got to in the code. Like that's just the stack trace of the code in the error. But the tracing in open telemetry is like the overtime view as you went down through the stack, and that could even span multiple components of the application, right? You could have like, okay, I have my request came into the workhorse, and you know, as an example, we could instrument say request comes into workhorse and then it goes to Nginx and then it hits the Rails stack. Then it does a bunch of stuff in the Rails stack. Then it goes into Gitly, and then maybe it's over doing stuff in Gitly, and then it goes back out and then it does some more stuff in the database. Like with open telemetry as the standard, it's flexible enough that you could instrument and show that whole round trip in an entire span. Whereas it's errors, it's like, where did I blow up in this particular spot in Rails? So it's a completely different case.
I don't know though, because like I say, obviously it's giving us this stack trace, which is essentially the same thing. It's not a waterfall style, but it's saying, okay,
but it's only for errors. The point with tracing is that for whatever request you want to do, whatever request you want to get information about.
That's where I'm kind of getting at that. Like, if we enabled it for everything, then we could still filter to show errors, but we could show everything. And then we would get metrics as well, I imagine, if that makes sense. So I'm wondering if it's one bird.
I'm not seeing it, like the error tracking.
You can't see it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not understanding what you're saying. You're saying like send even all requests to error tracking, even non-errors?
No, okay. So at the moment we've got analytics, which is giving us numbers and times, albeit not really the most detailed. It's giving us a bit of information, numbers and times. We've got error tracking, which is giving us some kind of stack trace. Now, what you seem to be saying with this open telemetry, that you're getting the trace and you're getting, like, that trace basically includes the numbers. So I feel like the open telemetry could almost solve both of these problems.
No, like yes, like errors can be an event, but tracking your errors is like a distinct activity than giving metrics on all activity in your system, even non-errors. Like when there's an error, you usually want to say like, why did this error happen? Where was it? How often does the same class of error happen? And those are, different goals, different questions you're asking than about just what is the behavior of my system in general? What's my P95 and
just
stuff like
that? Filter that I would apply to like here, where I would be able to say like status is error, and then boom, I've got this kind of information. But I don't know. Like I say, I'm going to try and distance myself to some extent at this point, because I'm happy I've implemented it, and it's kind of like,
yeah. And I didn't mean to hijack the conversation. I'm just saying, like,
I've been really interested in finding out
what is the best tool for this job, and that's the one we should invest in. And like in general, open telemetry, our product supports it, and it's a standard, and it's extremely flexible. And it allows you to visualize the data in other tools that may be better than GitLab if you so chose to, us or external customers. So there's like a lot of benefits to investing in open telemetry.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm just having a look. I don't know if that's sort of still loading.
Yeah, like we can schedule a follow-up like on open telemetry and observability. And I've been working with Nicholas Click and his entire group over there. Just this was just sort of something I wanted to do to try to dogfood it in GitLab because of frankly the limitations of the current approaches we have, even on production. Like Kibana is not optimal in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump into the next. So the next thing is then that the data for both product analytics and for error tracking, if I've got this right and I remember right, is in ClickHouse. Now I only have access to the analytics data. I don't know if anyone has access to the And to be honest, maybe the metrics and trace data is in here as well. Do you know if that's the ClickHouse is the back end for storing that?
I have zero clue about any of this. I've never been in this
No
ClickHouse UI.
worries. So, like for the recording, essentially, this is what we wanted to then, because there's limitations to what you can visualize on the dashboard at the moment. I don't know, again, if you've seen any of this, but you can visualization. Yeah, so there's a bunch of off-the-shelf
Go back in the
visualization.
analytics dashboard. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of off-the-shelf. It may not be enabled. Let me just check product. Visualization designer. So there's this kind of, you can say, right, I want events and I want to see like the event name. And then I want to see what I could do like a, oh no, that is the count. Is there a date in there somewhere? Grouped by day. And then we can probably, you get the idea anyway. But there's limitations to what you can do within the UI within GitLab at the moment. So
right. And the cool thing about OpenTelemetry, not to get back on that train, but it also has this concept of a collector. So you could say, all right, I'm emitting my raw data from the application I'm observing, but I can pipe it through this collector which is very configurable. And you can say, I'm going to send, my data to GitLab and be able to see it in monitor traces, somewhere probably in this observability project. But I'm also sending another copy of that data out to Honeycomb, which could have, vastly better UI and features, that because, our offering is still very young and nascent compared to that.
Yeah, what do we call it? Not immature, but yeah, it's early access, it's minimum viable, whatever.
So could you show me like how you instrumented the code for this, or
yeah, absolutely. We'll just I'll show you a quick query here,
sure,
and then we'll jump
whatever
into
you
that.
want.
So this I feel is very applicable to you as well. So this was kind of part of the now we've got some instrumentation around like remote development workspaces. Now, what you saw that you couldn't do in the dashboard, go back to this one, I guess. We get it wrong, but is you've got this just annoying kind of JSON string, and you can't sum it, average it, see what's going on with it, something. Whereas, I'm sure you know SQL well enough to know that, right, okay, now we've got functions so we can actually extract some of that information. Now, here's one I prepared earlier, and I have no idea if it's going to be useful or helpful or whatever, but
so this visit param extract float is like a function to extract the data out of that JSON string.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it looks like I've broken it now. So, but yeah, this would allow us to do group buys and sort of like properly get the data in the way that the shape that we wanted to see. Is it improving? Is it getting better or worse? Yeah, that doesn't seem.
Yeah, I would recommend you, and if you have a few free minutes, like go to Honeycomb and like just sign up for an account and watch like their intro video as an example of like how they debug an actual production issue and the power of what an observability UI can give you to drill down and ask these ad hoc questions in a very intuitive way with a great UI.
I can spell telemetry. I'll try and find where we did the instrumentation.
Sure.
So, okay, bigger than I expected it to be. I want to say, where did we start by? Obviously, we had to pop a couple of gems on. So GitLab SDK is a wrapper around the snowplow Ruby gem. So
Okay,
that's,
cool.
yeah. And then we just use Sentry Ruby actually for sending the data, the error tracking data. We don't even have like a wrapper around that. And the main thing that I did, I think, was in the, I think it's just called GDK RB. So where we like any GDK command that you issue, where we kind of interpret that and execute that command, I basically wrapped it in this new run method. And the run method just calls this with telemetry. And
so the telemetry method is like out of the one of the gems, or is that a thing you have?
so that's
Oh,
something
this is
that
something where,
I've
okay,
exactly, although ultimately,
awesome.
obviously, there's down the line it calls it, but we just we check
Yep,
whether
I get
they've
it.
opted in.
So you're just wrapping whatever you do in it. So the cool thing, Lee, is if you wanted to add open telemetry support to this, like
Let me
you just add it in here. Like you add the necessary gems to the GDK, add it in here, and then it's doing both of them.
I was going to say, I thought
Because
you were going to
you
say
want to
you don't
observe the
even
same
have to do
events.
anything. I thought you maybe could just install the gem and it just kind of
You
insert
can,
itself.
like
But
it actually did. That's all I did for the main monolith. Or there's like a lot of, open source off the, default gems for all sorts of things, for like Rails itself, for GraphQL, for Sidekick. And yeah, they just sort of worked out of the box to some extent or another. We're still dogfooding it, but the GDK is like, it's not a Rails project, so you sort of have to, you'd have to start somewhere, but it's really easy. Like you define a span and then you pass that down and then you say, okay, that's sort of the same thing you did. It's just like wrap whatever I'm doing in this span block and then it will
yeah,
return it.
the biggest challenge with this is that we're getting back pretty unhelpful messages. And when you look, I don't know how much you've dug into the GDK in the past, but there's kind of Ruby
For the
commands that
errors again,
call,
right?
they call
Yeah,
shell
again, for Sentry,
commands.
I still think Sentry is the best tool for looking at the
But even
errors.
that, I think GDK is the problem here rather than it being the error tracking tool. I think it's because we've got Ruby code calling shell scripts, calling make
Mhm.
files, call it, like we've just got this really weird tech stack in the GDK. So I think that's the primary issue with this. I don't
Right.
know what
But the with open telemetry, like it's agnostic to those platforms, right? So essentially what you're saying the problem is your level of observability like only goes down to what Ruby is doing. And then when it gets into shell land, like it's this big black box and then eventually
yeah,
it comes back. So with open telemetry, like since it's, language platform agnostic, it's the standard, you know, uh, protocol, you should be able to add the instrumentation to your shell scripts as well. Just say, pick up this span. I have the same token, the same API. I somehow, pass the span ID down as a parameter or something, and I can still instrument at that lower level.
that sounds
Yeah, we
really
should definitely hack
interesting.
on this. I know this call took a completely different path, but I think it's
I think
great.
it's going to be interesting for people to see what we've done, why we did it, and where it could potentially move going forwards.
And
Excuse me,
it's
got a bit
still
of
fully aligned with
allergies
dog
kicking.
fooding. Yeah, I had some too, but it's still fully aligned with dog fooding GitLab features because our observability and tracing and stuff. We can send all these to the product.
Yeah, and I'd still love another update. I haven't really spoken to the teams that recently to understand, like, are all these three things still really relevant? Product analytics, error tracking, and then observability, which I guess is maybe traces and metrics. Do we believe there's different use cases and they're all still relevant and moving forwards, or are
Yeah,
we dropping one or two, or what's the way forward?
So sometime I've got a lot on my plate right now, but like let's set up a session to hack on this and just see, let's try to add the open telemetry gem and just this, telemetry wrapper that you already have in place. Just say, what's the minimum we could do? Can we just wrap this in an open telemetry span and go ahead and point that to,
Yeah.
that observability project you had is like, that's the purpose of it too. The observability team has set that up to collect data for our own purposes. And so we can just make a separate GDK project in there and have the data just like you saw for staging
Okay.
and
Yeah.
take it from there and iterate on it.
Yeah. Feel free to fire something in my calendar, and we'll have a little hacking session.
Cool.
Awesome.
And yeah, that's the cool thing about this stuff. Like you can have your points of where you want to observe, but you can observe it in multiple ways at that points. You can, send those events out to
How
different
does
places.
So with Sentry, I've told it like basically a sample rate of 1 to take everything. How does the open telemetry, do you do the same? You provide a sample rate to tell it how much data to send, or?
Yeah, I know that's configurable. I honestly like most of it just worked out of the box. I honestly don't know if it's likely. So I talked about the collector concept, right? So I think the way it works is the client will always just spit out every event and then it
Yeah.
eventually hits the collector. So in this case, the collector is just like GitLab itself. And however they configure tracing probably has the open telemetry collector configured to do some sample rate or whatever. Maybe it's everything, maybe it's parts of things. But you can also stand up your own collector, right? And have it as a pass-through and configure it to do lots of very flexible things, to do sample rates, to fork it and send it out to multiple other
Yeah.
endpoints,
Yeah.
collectors, massage the data along the way if you want.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
But I
that's why
imagine
like
if you
open
had it,
telemetry is the new standard, but it's it's really powerful and
no, that's
becoming more
awesome.
used.
Yeah, brilliant. Awesome. Thanks for taking the time, Chad. And we'll share this recording. And yeah, but please set something up with me so we can hack a bit. Like I say, Oksana on my team's really interested in this stuff as well. So hopefully she'll get involved.
Yeah, and when you when you share the recording, we're probably going to do it in a GDK channel, I suppose.
Yeah, good question. I'll share it in the GDK channel, and I'm trying to think where this conversation was happening in an issue, but I don't know.
Yeah, and the issue, all I was saying is like along with it, can you give at least some pointers to like Snowplow and how you get access to this account to see the stuff and
Yep.
where people can start?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just trying to think like, can I probably share this publicly? Do you think there's anything that I don't think there's any reason why I can't.
I don't know. I did
You
make
didn't
some
say
comments
anything
about
top secret.
our features compared to Honeycomb, but I don't know if that's
I think things like Sentry and Google Analytics and gold standards, it's fine to reference, and it's
yeah,
like we're
exactly.
plagiarized. So awesome. Thanks, Chad. Have a great day.
Talk to you later, Lee.
Bye bye.